Hello everyone.
I'm back.
I'm back with another stream on my World Cup 2021 victory. Well, today, a few hours before that, we got a very sad news from Moscow. Um, a famous grandmaster Evgeny Sveshnikov passed away today, and of course, it's very sad. Another COVID um, yeah, COVID grandmaster. I don't know how to put it, but I had a chance to work with Evgeny Linovich. He showed me the Alapin variation back in 1999, a long time ago already, when we were playing in the Bled Open, and I won a very nice game after that. And also we worked together for my 2003 match in Brissago against Sergei Karyakin. He showed me one of his line in Sveshnikov, so that's a opening line that's named after him. And of course, it's always sad to read such news. But what can we do? We can play more Sveshnikov and Alapin and the advanced line in the French defense as well. He was also a very big supporter of this line. Well, in the first part of in the first match of this World Cup, I was able to use this line. I already showed you. That's a advanced variation of the French defense, and there are some books written by Sveshnikov himself on this line, so if you're interested you can find these books and read. So the Sveshnikov, of course, you know very well, the Sveshnikov variation. In Russia we call it the Chelyabinsk variation, but I believe in the English literature it's called the Sveshnikov variation. Why is it called Lasker Pelikan variation here? Here we go. Now it's the Sveshnikov variation. And of course the Alapin variation, which was also Evgeny Linovich promoted a lot and played many games. And well, just my condolences and regards to his family and to the whole chess world. It's quite a sad news. But let's carry on. Life goes on. And as I said, we just can play a few more chess games with Sveshnikov's favorite lines and variations in his memory. Okay, well, back to the FIDE Women's World Cup 2021 and my journey in it. We stopped after round 3. For those of you who didn't have a chance to watch the first part of this stream last week, I will remind you that this World Cup was held in Sochi, Russia, in the mountain resort of Sochi, which is called Krasnaya Polyana, which can be translated as well, I have problems with words today in English. I'm not sure how Polyana translated into English. Let me see. Meadow. Well, let it be meadow. So it can be translated as a red meadow or a beautiful meadow. The word krasnaya can mean both this thing at the same time. The color, and originally it comes from the word красивая, which means beautiful. Yes, exactly. And that was the place of the Olympic Games in 2014. It's a very nice place. I shared some photos last week, and probably I will make another stream with just photos and videos. But today I want, as I promised, I want to show you the games of my round 4 and round 5 of this tournament. So it was a knockout event. I started playing at the second round. There were some players starting to play from round 1. Then there were seeded players, 25 seeded players in the women's section, and 50 players in the open section, starting to play from the round 2. So last week we discussed, I showed you my games from the second round, and that was the match against Daisy Corey. And then I went on to play with the legendary Pia Kramling in the third round. Also got lucky to win with the black pieces in the first round, and then made a draw in the second round, and thus I was qualified to play in the fourth round, where I met the former Women's World Chess Champion Maria Muzychuk. And another interesting thing about Maria, that actually she won her title, the world champion title, back in 2015 at the same exact venue, at the same exact place, in Sochi, Krasnaya Polyana. So definitely she had good memories about this place, and she had a very difficult third round though. She was playing against another former world champion, her compatriot Anna Ushenina, and it was a very tense match. They played tiebreak, but well, that's another story that Maria should tell probably. And let's get to this match. Prepare some photos from this match. So in the first game of this match, I was playing white. Actually, it's quite an interesting question. What pieces one preferred to start with in a knockout event? Because if you play the first game of a 2 games match with white, that means that the next game, the second one, will be played with black. I think, for myself, I feel more comfortable to start with black pieces, because then after your game with black pieces, you have white pieces ahead of you, and you kind of can make a plan. Again, no sound. I'm muted. Oh, you got me scared, because I see I see that everything goes on fine. I see this bar on my mixer, audio mixer, and then okay, good. But anyway, so let's start discussing this match. I was playing white in the first game, and actually Maria, as well as her sister Anna, I played against Anna in the quarterfinals of the previous Women's World Championship. At that time it used to be called the World Championship in Khanty-Mansiysk in 2019. And Anna, in our match 2 years ago, she played the Sveshnikov against me. This time Maria played e6. I don't know whether she was about to play the Sveshnikov or not. Sometimes she plays the Paulsen variation, just plays knight c6 or e6 or other moves, but sometimes she does, they both, Anna and Maria, they transfer the game to the Sveshnikov line. Of course, white has some other option and other lines, such as knight takes c6, which is quite popular, and other moves here as well. But I think that's actually the move order that we used with Anna. But this time, since Maria also plays some other opening lines, and I was not sure that move order will appear on the board, I decided to try this move. And yes, Georgia, hello. We talked about Evgeny at the beginning of the stream. That's a very sad news. Well, the idea of this move for white is quite simple, right? They're fighting for the center. They want to play d4 later on, and after c takes d4, take on d4, then hopefully bring the knight to c3 and take control over black center. Of course, black doesn't want just to sit and wait and see how white is threatening, is improving his position in the center. So there are some counter ideas for black. And what I was saying, the interesting thing that Maria plays this same line. There are many games by her with white. And knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4. Knight c3 is kind of obliged because there is no way to protect this pawn. f3, I think d5 is a threat now. Bishop d3 is not possible because the knight will be hanging. So knight c3 looks like the only move here. And then the counter ideas that I was talking about is bishop b4. Quite quite an often seen moves in these lines and setups. Black pins the knight on c3, and thus, since the knight on c3 is the only defender of the e4 pawn, creates a threat of taking on e4. So white has to do something, and again, the choice is limited because this knight requires to be protected. I cannot play bishop d3, so I take on c6, and actually quite recently, I mean a few years ago, it was believed that d takes c6 can be good option for black, but the evaluation has changed since then because white found new ideas in this line. And actually, let me check, and actually Maria herself played a very nice game with this line with white on one of the Olympiads and won it. Just let me check if I have it here. I think so. So d takes c6. Yeah, I have it against Karina Pepton in Batumi in 2018. So the current situation, the current opening or endgame situation in this particular position is that white can play e5, and that as a move that has been discovered quite recently, because before it was believed, trusted that black will just go to e4 and will win the pawn. But in fact, it's not that easy and it's not that simple, because white plays a3, and if black takes, white takes, and if black is greedy and continue taking on c3, then white has a possibility to play a4, which is a very strong move, kind of cutting off the black knight from returning closer to his pieces via a4. And if the knight goes to e4, it's still quite far away. White can play bishop e3, and again threatening to play bishop d3 or f3 later on, and white does get a very strong compensation in this particular line. So d takes c6 is not played very often. let me continue the line, right? If black plays b6, then a5 follows, so that's why a4 was a very strong move, not only cutting away the knight from the black pieces, but also preparing this a5. And then after rook b8, white takes and plays rook a7. And as I said, a very strong compensation, two bishops, the rook on the 7th rank, and the knight is not very well placed here, and the weak king. That can be a problem, a serious problem, after white develops and brings his rook to d1. So d takes c6 is not that popular as it used to be, and normally nowadays black plays b takes c6. I must mention that it seems that bishop b4 is not the only option. There are very good moves for black here, and probably the simplest way to equalize is to play bishop c5. But I found out about it only after the game, and before the game I was preparing mostly for bishop b4. Also, one interesting thing, that this exact position appears often after from the English opening. So for example, c4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3 or d4, doesn't matter, knight f6, knight c3, e6, and here e4 is not the most dangerous move for white. Here, knight d to b5, I believe, is played more often, but if white plays e4, we get the same position that in the game. So bishop b4 has been played in the game. I took on c6, b takes c6, I played bishop d3, preparing the move e5. That's why black stopped this my idea by putting her pawn onto the central square, castle, castle, h3. That was our opening preparation. Don't ask me why. That's quite a tricky question, but well, let's say that the g4 square is quite important in some lines, which is probably not the best explanation one can give, but h3 is kind of prophylactical waiting move. I wait for the next move from black, and then we'll decide accordingly where to put my pieces and how to play here. Of course, h3 is not the only move, and actually it's quite a recent move. There have been many games played in this particular position. I'm not sure what are the most played moves here, but probably it's queen c2 or queen e2 or bishop e3 or even knight e4. Protecting the knight or not protecting the knight, but preparing the d1 square for the rook, bishop e3, knight a4, and so on and so on. And every single move is possible here and playable, and there have been games played I think with every single one of these moves. Yep. Okay, for example, in the Bucharest Super Tournament this summer, there was a game between Mamidyarov versus Grishuk, and Mamidyarov played bishop e3 here. One of the possibilities, and black took on c3, which is also quite possible, not necessary, but possible. Okay, I played h3, and again, bishop takes c3 seems to be quite logical here, and probably I would play it if I were black. There were other games between strong grandmasters, for example, Apari and Chiparinov, saw the move bishop c5 happening in their game, and white eventually won this game in quite a nice style. The Magic Tea, thank you so much for subscription. And so we prepared, of course, a lot of moves that black can play here at home, but my opponent surprised me. Well, she played the move that I think it's impossible to predict, and probably it's a novelty, because I think nobody will even think about such an option. H3 is a rare move, but the move that she played here is the rarest. Okay, bishop to e7. Well, I mean, what to say? I don't see a point of bringing the bishop so far away from the center battle back to e7. Yes, it's very solid. Yes, no bishop g5 ideas will be possible after that. But I mentioned some moves that I think are much stronger than bishop e7, and after bishop e7, of course, I get a very comfortable position. I played bishop e3, threatening to play c5 and kind of block the pawns on the squares where they are. d6 was almost forced. And here is a very interesting moment. I need to run just a second. There is a call. I'll be back in a second. Don't leave me, and I will tell you why the moment is very interesting. I'll be back in a second. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was unexpected. Okay, let's get back. I see your discussion about bishop takes c3 and d5. Yes, that's a possibility. That was possible, but will not really gathered here for analyzing this particular opening line, although we could. But so let's get back to the game where a black played bishop e7, the move that I cannot recommend, I don't like, and I don't want you to play in your own games. Let's put it this way. And we stop at this particular position where I could have been very happy with the opening outcome, because I got everything that white wants in this particular line. So I have very nicely put pawns on e4 and c4. d5 doesn't seem so easy to achieve. Yeah, and let me show you why d5 is not possible. I'm sure you know, but it's like a very famous trick that every chess trainer shows to his students. So d5 is not possible just yet. Black needs to prepare it, and well, how they prepare it? Usually by bringing the bishop to e6, the rook to d8, and protecting the d5 square. We will see that in the game. And yeah, the situation here is quite interesting. So the opening is over. We step into the middle game phase, and this so-called choosing a plan. And in this game, I chose to make everything that is in my power to stop the possible d5 in the future. So I brought my queen to f3. I brought my rooks to the center, and I retreated the bishop from d3, and I put a lot of control on this d5 square. Another plan, which looked quite tempting and is being used pretty often here by white, is to play b4 and to try to prepare b5 or c5, and thus kind of weaken black's center. b4 was a very interesting option, and of course if black just plays bishop e6 or something like this, then white still have a very pleasant play. The question is whether d5 is possible after b4, and there are some concrete lines that appear after that with a lot of exchanges, and it seems that white can still have some advantage, but I'm not sure how big this advantage is. So I don't really like his b4 move, even though the computer recommends it, and I still think that the plan that I chose in the game was fine. I played queen to f3. As I said, I tried to put as many attacks on the d5 square as possible. Okay, and black continued with bishop e6. I put the rook on the d file, queen b8, b3, protecting this pawn that was just attacked, rook d8. I retreated the bishop to e2, and white to e2. I tried to actually change. I tried to play queen g3 and play bishop f3, because I thought that the bishop is a better defender of the d5 squares than the queen, and the queen can help me to create some threats on the king side. Queen to b7, queen to g3, king to h8, rook a to c1. The queen on g3 is attacking the pawn on e5, making the d5 breakthrough more difficult. And black tried to create some counter chances on the queen side. Quite surprisingly, actually, for quite a long time during the game, I was not able to understand black's idea. Only then I realized that the idea is to play a4. Well, for example, I don't know, I make bishop g5 move. The idea is to play probably a4, and then after knight takes e4, take on c4. That was by the way, bishop g5 is not the worst move to make, because here I have different ideas connected with bishop takes f6 and c5. So that was definitely the move to consider. But we repeated the moves. And again, bishop g5 with the queen on a3 was a possibility, but I saw another idea. I played bishop g4 with the idea after knight takes g4, h takes g4 to open up the h file. That's the h file that almost led me to losing this game, and creating another interesting possibility, which I didn't dare to use in the game. So a4, that was the critical moment of this game, one of the critical moments of this game. I was already running short on time for some reason, for some unknown reasons. Where did this whole time go to? And well, bishop c1, bishop d2 is always, right, a possibility, was always a possibility to repeat the moves, but since I played bishop g4, I had another idea in mind, and here I didn't choose the correct way to play. So the correct way to play was to play bishop c1, to ask the queen to go to b4, and then play knight d5. Quite possible, quite a typical idea in the Sicilian defense. And here we see why the pawn being on g4 is very important, because it keeps under control the f5 square. Because if I take with the c pawn, then queen takes e4 will follow. So I should take with the e pawn. Zol is there. Thank you so much for subscription. Okay, so let's continue with the game. And I just, in the game I was calculating this line, but somehow I did not believe that. I was just afraid that I miss something, and I didn't trust my feelings. That was the problem. I didn't feel that I'm much better here, because some complications start, but I have intermediate moves. Move d takes e6, which is quite important, because if I take with the rooks, then just bishop takes d5 follows, and that's a problem. The rook on e4 is hanging after c takes d5, and if I take with the rook, then the bishop on c1 is hanging. So it's very important to see this intermediate move well in advance. D takes e6, and after bishop takes e3, that's the line I needed to calculate, and that's the position that I needed to evaluate. Somehow I didn't manage to, and somehow I was so carried away by one idea that actually happened in the game, which is completely not correct. And instead of the correct bishop c1 and knight d5 here with an advantage, I played knight takes a4. Actually, my husband, when I got back from this game, he said, "Oh, you missed bishop takes e4, didn't you?" And no, I said, I saw everything. I didn't miss bishop takes e4. I just chose this line. He said, "Oh, that's too bad. That's even worse than missing it." Okay, and I'll show you why. Okay, bishop takes e4. One last chance to stop going down very fast was well, and again, I saw this move was a possibility to play rook c3 instead of b takes c4. Why? Because bishop b5 here would have been a big mistake, and I saw that black cannot make this move because of my idea. My idea that I tried so hard to bring to life during the game, and the idea is quite unexpected. Queen h2. So suddenly my pieces very fast get to the h file, and rook h3 is a very unpleasant, of course, threat, because the h7 pawn cannot really be protected, and after h6 I always have bishop takes h6, so bishop f8 is almost obliged, rook to h3, but here I mean, I'm not risking, I'm not worse. I can even, I think, take on h6 if I want to draw. Yeah, I can take on h6 and it was perpetual, but I can try to continue this attack as well. I can also include knight b6 with the idea of rook b7 losing already. After rook b7, black loses in this line because the rook on d8 starts to hang. And that's my idea, with double attack, and then I take on d8, protecting the knight, and I'm winning here. The only problem that after rook c3, of course, black doesn't have to go to b5, they should go to e6, back to e6. And here queen h2, of course, doesn't work because of bishop take g4. But at least here I can take on c6. And after queen takes a2, I can play knight b6. And I mean, I'm still struggling here for equality, but since my pieces are placed so well, and these pawns kind of can easily be attacked or blockaded, then I mean, I'm fine. I'm fine. I mean, I'm better than in the game, yeah. And I have the threat knight c8, then take on e7, and then opposite colored bishops and games most probably will arise, and one extra pawn will not really will not mean a lot. And that was much stronger. Rook c3 was much stronger than b takes c4, so another wrong choice. I saw both lines. I was kind of hesitating and choosing in between, and I thought that the bishop is here, like it's more important to take the bishop, and it's not. It's much more important to activate my pieces, to take the pawn on c6, to bring the knight to b6, because here finally I made this queen h2 with another not a very careful move, because I saw that after king g8 I don't really have any ideas left, because my bishop is hanging. I wish my rook could stand on d1 and protect this bishop on d2, but it's not the case. So I should have played g5 instead, hoping somewhere to use the h file like this. And here the position is also, well, worse of course for me, but it's not that easy for black to bring her pieces into the game, because if she goes rook b7, I can always play c5, and her pawns are quite weak. If she plays c5, she stabilizes, of course, the center, but I have a possibility to attack from the other side. So I do have some counterplay for the sacrificed pawn, let's put it this way. Instead, I made another weak move, which is queen h2. Yes, I'm threatening a deadly rook h3, but a simple prophylactical king g5 is very strong, because as I said, after rook h3, she just simply takes, and I don't have time to take on h7 because the rook on c1 is hanging. So I had no other really option than to play g5. My opponent played rook b7, which is very strong, queen h5, rook b3, so she finally exchanged this active rook on the third rank that was getting ready to play rook h3, and now I have pawn down and a worse position. What else to wish for? Here black did not really make the strongest move. He should have kept the queen on the third rank and attack my pawns and prepare g6, d5, c5, some moves here, just prepare, get ready to improve her position. That can be improved by bringing the rook on the b file, by securing the position of the king. Instead she played queen b7, g3, queen d7, so she started quite a strange looking maneuver to g6. And here, of course, I should have taken the queen and play rook a1. And again, this position, despite me being a pawn down, but thanks to my active rook and her bad bishop and her weak pawns, are closer to a draw. And she has double pawns, right? So this extra pawn is not really felt, we cannot really feel it so much, and this c6 pawn, I can always attack it, and as I said, the bishop is quite passive. That was the best option for me, but somehow I thought that I must keep the queens on the board to have this, I don't know, some counter chances, which is absolutely not true. I made another bad move, which is queen g4, h6, quite a strong move. Now this pawn is pinned, and I'm about to lose the second pawn. I tried my best to save the game. So the time control, that's move 40, so no more time trouble. And I saw a very nice trap, which actually loses the game, but somehow it helped me to save the game. Instead, I think I should have played queen c8, with the idea after king h7 to play rook h4, and with double attack here. It might have helped to save the game as well. And after rook d8, I can bring the queen back to g4. Still struggling, still struggling. But I made the move king h3. And here, for some unknown reasons, I don't know really why, because Maria is such an active player. And why did not she find queen b1? Quite an easy queen b1, with the idea if I retreat the king to go to d1, and now checkmating threats are starting to be quite annoying. That probably was the easiest way for black to win the game. H takes g5 was also pretty strong, because after bishop takes g5 she has rook d4, and if I go to c8 she can, well, she can play, I think, bishop to d8 with two pieces hanging, and with the king being very weak, so it gets under checkmating threats every time. So that were two winning moves, h takes g5 or queen b1. Instead, she opted for e4, and that was my hope, that was my trap, let's put it this way. Somehow I thought that after king h3 it's so tempting to play e4, but this move spoils a lot. I think it leads, I mean, it's getting, I'm not sure about the evaluation of this position. I think it's this position suddenly becomes holdable for white after e4, which is, as I said, so tempting to play. But I noticed that after this e4, despite all these attacks and all these pins, I have a very strange looking move, rook h4. So I'm pinning myself. I move my rook out of this annoying pin on the 5th rank, and I'm starting to, well, for the moment, it's not so clear what to play, right? Because the pawn on e4 is hanging. And if she protects the pawn, I give a check, and I get back. And this pawn is pinned. And if she takes on g5, then I just take, and I take the e4 pawn, and okay, 3 pawns versus 2, but as we know, it's a theoretical draw. Luckily for me, I can escape the pawn's endgame. Okay, well, here of course black can torture for a very, very long time, and I think that was the right actually choice for black to try to play in this 3 versus 2 queens endgame. Very unpleasant. But my opponent played a queen to e6, and here, well, I made a fine move, but not the strongest one. The strongest one was to play bishop d4, with the idea to take on g4 with the rook, and then after rook e6 to play rook f4. And again, 3 versus 2 endgame will appear, but here it's like, it looks more drawish. I took on e6, And I was about actually to play rook h5, I think, in the game. No, rook f4. I wanted to play rook f4, and suddenly I realized that after rook f4, I'm just losing the game because black takes on g5 and plays king to g6, and my rook is trapped, and the game is over. So I stopped here. I thought for a very long time, and I found the only move that holds the position, which is rook to g4. That was the only move, because as I said, rook f4 loses because of h takes g5. Rook h5 loses because of bishop takes g5, bishop takes g5, and king g6. A very nice move. And black has 2 extra pawns, which should be enough to win the game. And if I play king to g4, again, black wins the second pawn by playing king to g6. And there is no way for me to protect this pawn, because after rook h5, black takes on g5 and threatening to play f5. So I don't have time to take on g5, unfortunately for me. I see that some of you mentioned king to h4. Well, king to h4, I think it's quite understandable that should lose the game here. There are several ways to win. f5 is possible, h takes g5 is possible, and well, it's just impossible to play with such a king with the queens on the board. So no, rook h4 is the only move here, which helped me to save the game. Another very precise move is rook g4, and actually here I was surprised to see that my opponent played king g8. h5, my idea was to play rook f4 and to play g4, and she cannot win this pawn on g5. I mean, she can, for example, she can win it, she can exchange it for the e4 pawn, but that's a draw. She played king g8, but here I played g takes h6, and after g6 I play rook f4, another very precise move, and here she played g5, which completely, I mean, equalizes. Instead she should have tried f5, her last choice, and I thought that she would opt for it, she would try this move in the game, because here she threatens to win my exchange. And but I saw the line that will lead to a draw, so I was going to play g4 with the idea after bishop g5 to take on f5, and after rook e5 I was going to take on f5, and here quite a difficult choice. I was not I didn't know where to go, to what position to go, so I could just simply go to h4, and then since my pawn on h6 is so strong and my king is so active that well, most likely just a very simple draw. Another possibility for me that I considered was king to g3, with the idea after bishop g5 to take on f5 and to play rook g4, king g4, and again win this bishop and have this position with 2 pawns on h6 and f2. Both lines are possible, but at least I needed to make a few more careful moves. Instead, as I said, my opponent played g5, but in that case that's quite an easy draw, because even though she has an extra pawn, still has an extra pawn, but my pieces are wonderfully placed suddenly, and my king goes to f5, and I was already starting to think here about playing for a win, but okay, it's such significant change from what I had during the game to this particular position that of course I agreed on a draw. It's still 2 versus 2, but I am the one who is pressing a little bit here. But of course when my opponent offered to draw, I agreed on a draw, and we go on to the second game of the match, where I was playing black, and I annotated this game for the next New in Chess edition, and this game was awarded the beauty prize of the 4th round. So quite a nice game indeed. When you analyze it after the tournament, well, it does not really, feel so special anymore. It loses its charm, but anyway, I was playing black, as I said, the Italian game, gioco piano, d3 line, not d4 but d3, castle, castle, and d5. I opted for the most direct approach against the Italian. Of course, other moves, there are huge number of setups which are equally good for black here. But I played d5, and I must say that my opponent was, I think, well, I don't know, but she did go for quite an unpleasant line for black. Rook e1. There are many move orders and many nuances that if we would start to try to understand those, it will require us like several days. For example, white can include a4 first, and that does change quite a lot some lines and variations. But of course, in the game she did not play a4 for some reason. I think that if when I was playing this line with white, I always included a4, a6 moves. I thought this is helpful for white in many ways. Okay, h3, bishop h4, knight b to d2, knight to b6, and quite an interesting crossroad with many possibilities that have been played here with white. I must mention that the pawn on e5, well, here the pawn on e5 is not really hanging because black gets a very good compensation here for it, since the king side is weakened. Bishop takes f2 is possible, but it's not the only move. Probably it's not the strongest move here. So white doesn't usually take on e5. And bishop b3 she played. A very interesting trendy line apparently. A few days before the World Cup there was a blitz game in the Zagreb Grand Prix. Anand used this line against Mamediarov, and there were several other top level games. Aronian played several times with black pieces, defended this position several times with black pieces, and well, it seems that the most critical reply, of course, here is to take on d3. White is giving up the pawn, and why not to take it? Well, I used there are some lines with where white sacrifices this pawn, and I did not really remember what will it lead. This move will lead to, so I did not take on d3. In the game that I mentioned, Anand Mamediarov played a4, and here a5, sorry, and a4 would have been an interesting choice for white, offering again to take on d3. Anand played knight e4, but here after a4 and rook a5, surprisingly, black got a good position, equalized the game, and even white fought for a draw here. Another move. So after queen d3, knight takes e5. It's quite important not to play queen g3, although it looks quite tempting. There were some lines and games played with this move. You can analyze it yourself. Bishop takes d1 is also not the best idea here, as has been seen in the several games, including Giri Hare Krishna. The endgame that appears here is worse for black, apparently, although it's not so easy to believe, but somehow this bishop cannot find a good place. After bishop d6 it gets under attack by the knight. After bishop e7 it's protected by the knight on c6, and the knight on c6 is being attacked, so it's quite annoying. And another move that black makes here. So queen d3, option number 1, a5, option number 2, and option number 3 is king h8. Why the choice is limited? Because after retreating, after bishop b3, g4 becomes well, quite a possibility, and knight e4 as well. Knight e4, I think, is even more positional threat here. King to h8, I played knight e4, and here I played bishop d6. And actually two other moves that protect the bishop. The first one being bishop to e7, and the second one is knight to d7, are both possible. Both have been played by Aronian. The first one, bishop e7, has been played by him in Khanty-Mansiysk in the FIDE World Cup in 2019. The problem here is that after knight g3, black kind of obliged to take on f3, because after bishop g6, without the bishop on c5, black just loses the pawn, because bishop d3 brings to losing the game. So black has to take on f3 and play f5, which is quite important, not to let white knight goes here. And here we see the idea of moving the king to h8, actually the idea to free up from this annoying pin and prepare in the future to play with this pawn either to f5 or to f6. And in this game between Matlakov and Aronian, Aronian even won later on with black pieces, and I believe there were several games after that on this position. So again, it requires more analysis to make the correct evaluation on what move to play here. Knight d7, that has been also tried by Aronian in his rapid game against Jan Nepomniachtchi in one of the Magnus Carlsen tournament in November 2020. Also seems quite interesting. So the idea is to bring the bishop to leave the bishop on this long on this g1 a7 diagonal. But again here it's kind of black needs to give up a pair of bishops, but still the position is quite complicated, and both knight d7 and bishop e7 are possible. I played bishop to d6 in the game, and it's not a novelty. There were several games with this move already. g4, bishop g6, quite a logical continuation, because this pin is quite annoying. And here Maria played knight to g3, preparing king side pawn's march, which eventually led to her losing this game. And yes, we can say that it's all a theoretical line, because now the theory goes many moves ahead into the middle game. And there were several, well, there was one game played by Anish Giri in this particular position, and he opted for d4, which seems to be the best move for white here. And here Giri played against Inarkiev in a rapid world championship in 2018, and Inarkiev played knight takes d4. Actually, there were two games. And, well, probably rook e8 is a little bit more active here for black, but eventually it will lead to a position with a pair of bishops. Okay, the weakened king, the weakened king side, but I think it's a little bit better for white. So this line gives white a small, I don't know if we can call it opening advantage, but a small advantage. And that's the way a white should have played in this game, because instead of d4, Maria played knight g3. Well, she goes away from the center for no particular reason. I played knight to d7, preparing somewhere to go to c5, bishop c2, protecting the d3 square, moving out of this possible knight c5 attack. a5, kind of taking under control the queen side. And here we go, h4. I would say the wrong plan. It was not necessary to push the pawns forward. She could have played king to g2 or developed this bishop, but she was very straightforward in this game. h6 I played, of course, preparing for this h5 move, but she continued with h5, and I think that's, well, cool. A very serious mistake, h5 here, because the position is still unclear. It's very complicated. If white would play g5, g5 is a much stronger way to proceed with this pawn attack that white started. The idea is that after h5, trying to close the king side, knight h2 will follow and the pawn is hanging. Okay, I have a very strong compensation. I can play f5 and I do have a very good position here, but I would doubt that in the game I would dare to play h5. Of course, h takes g5 is a huge mistake here, because it opens up the h file, and after king g2, rook h1, we can start to feel the power of white pieces closer to black king. So I think after g5, most likely after g5 in the game, I would opt for f5, with the idea after g takes h4 to play f4 and to sacrifice the pawn like this. Again, how to evaluate this position, I'm not sure. I'll show you one beautiful line that I analyzed. Of course, there are many interesting variations here, but if white plays knight g5, threatening to give a fork from e6, then black has ignored this idea, and the strongest move here is f takes g3. And after knight e6, again, don't ask me why, but king h8 is the strongest move. Well, king h7 just gets under this bishop that will eventually be opened up and lead to some problems. So king to h8, and after f takes g3, as a position again is very chaotic, very complicated, and quite interesting. And if white plays knight e4, I'll show you one line that brought a smile to my face when I was analyzing it. So it's just like an example line, and I want to show you the journey of my king here, and it can lead to a perpetual. Okay. In other words, after g5, very complicated game could have been expected, but unfortunately for Maria, she didn't play g5, she included this h5 move, and it does change a lot. I play bishop g7, and now it's the last moment to stop. Again, king to g2, bishop to d2 were all possibilities, but as I mentioned, Maria did not hesitate here. She just went straight up, and with this pawn on h5, somehow white just cannot really well, the position is already very dubious. f5 I played, and g takes h6. That's for sure the final mistake. d4 was the last attempt to complicate the game, even though black is better here, but try to understand what you need to do after this d4 in a practical game. I think every single move is possible for white. f4 for black, e4, e takes d4, but again, you need to choose here. You need to pick just one continuation. And for example, after e4, knight h4, knight e7, king g2, with the idea to play rook h1 and king to g6, it's not so clear what to do and how to play here. Probably the simplest is to take on d4 and to play f4 here. But again, I feel that white has some potential in this position, and it's not that clear at all. While in the game, she continued with g takes h6, but in that case I just simply take. I play rook g8, threatening to play f4. Her idea was to play bishop b3, and I made the strongest move, which is queen f6, but in fact f4 was possible. I just did not see that after bishop takes g8, queen takes g8, knight g5, I have a very strong bishop f8 move. That's a move that escaped my attention. Instead, I was calculating only the line with f takes g3, queen f3, and the position is unclear at all. But, I mean, if you see bishop f8, you can also play f4 here easily. But I played queen f6, which is, as I mentioned already, the strongest move, because the bishop here is hanging, f4 is again a threat, and after bishop g5 I don't care to sacrifice a second rook, so I sacrificed 2 rooks for three minor pieces, but my minor pieces are much stronger than the rooks here, because the position of the king is very open, and the rooks cannot really use, there are no open lines in the position to be used by rooks, while my pieces are transferred easily from the queen side to closer to the king, and the position just collapses. She's in complete Zugzwang. Knight f6, bringing the knight to g4. Now I'm threatening to play knight h2. Here I made e4 move because I want to prepare f4, while if I play f4 here, she plays knight e4. So this square is very important, and after e4, if she takes on e4, after f4 her knight doesn't have this square anymore, and if she goes to f5, I have f3 and knight h2. d4, and here like the final touch, which is quite easily to find in this position, very easily to find. That's a position, this kind of position where you don't really need to calculate any difficult lines. You just look for your piece, for one of your pieces to improve its position, and you just start improving its position little by little. White completely desperate. It's completely desperate situation. No chance to for counterplay. No chance to complicate. No ideas to complicate. And so I saw that my knight here is just screaming to get to f4. And here we go. Knight to d8 in 2 moves. It's gonna get to f4. And in case white plays d5 to stop my knight from getting to f4, it will get to d3 or f3 via e5. As easy as that. And the valuation here is like -10 or something like this. Completely devastating. Yes, c4. Well, here I kind of hesitated. I thought maybe I should play c6 to leave my bishop on d6, but then decided, okay, anyway, after c5 I can make one move back, no big deal, but bring my knight to f4. After that, the queen needs to go back, and after that, another very nice piece maneuver. Yeah, exactly. Next future SC. Exactly, quite an easy one. You just look at the position and imagine your piece on a better square, and it happens to be d5 or c4 for this bishop. Just make bishop j8. White has to wait and to see. To wait and look at black's pieces position, at black's pieces improvement. And b3 will lead to bishop d5, and then eventually I will open up this diagonal, and the queen is just trapped. So my opponent tried to make this move, but it doesn't help. I just give a check, and after king to g1, f takes e4, he simply resigned because, well, checkmate will follow. Checkmate will follow. Let's see. I just give a check. I give a check, another check, and whether doesn't matter where she go, knight e2, checkmate. Yes, quite a nice game. Looked very one way, but as I showed you, there were some difficult moments. It just happened that white took a completely wrong direction every single time. You know, that happens. It's as every single choice she had, she made the wrong move. Well, that was my win in round number 4, and I went on to qualify for round number 5. I qualified for round number 5 for the quarterfinals against my compatriot, my teammate Valentina Gunina, and well, I mean, we've played several times. I mean, I don't know how many times we've played with Valentina.